Hey guys, so now we're going to be working on the American Revolution. How does this connect to the last social studies unit? Essentially, when we started social studies with, or this unit, when we started with the colonies. The colonies were kind of servants, if you will, under the king. So the king used them. Remember mercantilism? He believed that the colonies only exist to serve him. So if he wants something, the colonies give it to him, nobody else. So the Americans weren't really too fond of this. They wanted to be their own country. So we're going to explore how the colonists became members of the United States of America. And essentially, they started with saying goodbye to the king. They didn't want to live under him. He was taxing them on their tea. He was taxing them on things that they owned. He was taxing them on marriage licenses. He was taxing them on anything and everything in order to make money off of them. And they did not find this to be fair. So they said, you know what? We want to be free of him. How did they do that though? That's what we're going to explore. But first, there were three main groups involved in this. The first one is an easy group. They're neutralists. People who didn't care what side they were supposed to be on. So neutralists were just people who didn't really agree with the Constitution, which we're going to talk about next, which was made by the American people, but they also didn't really agree or disagree with the king. So they kind of didn't care which way they fell. They were just going to be citizens of the colonists, no matter who was ruling them. Then there's the British. They were known as redcoats and lobsterbacks. And if you think of a lobster, they're usually red. If you think of the word redcoat, you can see why they were called that. A redcoat is somebody wearing a red coat. The British made all of their soldiers wear these bright red uniforms. So you always knew who you were talking to. You looked at a red coat and you said, you are a British soldier. That's it. And finally, the revolutionists. The people of the Revolutionary War, the people on the American side, the colonist side, they wanted war with the king. They wore these little blue uniforms down at the bottom. I don't think you can see past me is the problem. So I'm going to move this over. See these uniforms down at the bottom? They wore those. So you could tell when you were speaking to a person who was for the revolution. They wanted war with the king because they wanted to be their own country. Now, we didn't start the war, believe it or not. We wanted the war to start, but we didn't start it. So essentially, we remember in Massachusetts how they used to smuggle things. That's how they made their money. They used to kind of steal things and pretend like they weren't doing that and didn't tell the king. Well, the king found out. This was after the Boston Tea Party. He started to look around and he realized that Boston was rich. Massachusetts and Boston were rich because they were lying to him, and that made him angry. So he essentially, after shutting down that port in Massachusetts, he starved the people in Massachusetts. They had no money, they had no food, nothing could come in or out of their colony. So they started a riot. A riot means they kind of yell and complain in the streets, they start marching, it's general kind of chaos in order to get their point across. But the British soldiers, the redcoats, not happy about it. So they became angry. There was kind of a pushing match where they were trying to get to the docks, that's where the boats are, to try and get supplies off of the boats. The British would not let them through. The colonists pushed past the British, and the British wound up firing at them. This killed many people. This was a major battle kind of between them. And this was called, they wound up naming this period, this time frame, the shot heard around the world, because the people that were killed were just trying to eat and they were trying to survive, and they were killed for it anyway by the British. It's also called the shot heard around the world because this is the first time really in history that somebody went up against the British and said, we've had enough, this is going to be our country now, and won. So this got the attention of everyone. Everyone in the world was now suddenly watching and waiting to see what would happen with this revolution. So they made a document. In order to let the king know that they no longer wanted to be under him, they made something called the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is a letter to the king. They write to the king a letter. It's a formal letter, and it's signed, as you can see at the bottom, by a whole bunch of people. Declaring independence just means you're saying that you want to be self-ruling, saying that you no longer want a king. They are independent or separate from the king. So, the thing about this document was signing it was dangerous because the king could do whatever he wanted. He made the rules. So when he saw your signature, if we didn't win the war, he could throw you in jail. He could have you killed. He could arrest your whole family. He could arrest and torture everyone that you know. So putting their names on this was a really, really, really big deal. And if you look, there's one name that is the biggest. And we're going to talk about who that was. These men here that you see on your screen, they wrote the Declaration of Independence. Their names were Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Jefferson. They wrote and made changes to this document so that it would be perfect. John Hancock, that huge signature at the bottom, was the first to sign it and signed his name the largest. That essentially told the king, I don't care what you do to me. I believe in this cause, and I am going to back it no matter what. Come and try and hurt me. And that was a really big statement to make, and it was a very brave and bold statement. So now, as a nickname for signature, we can also call it the John Hancock. That means that you're signing something, just because his signature was so big and so bold that people remembered it forever. Now, we're going to take a look at a phrase, a piece of the document. And if you look up at the top, the most famous phrase of the document is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, let's break it down, because that is a really confusing sentence. It's written in really kind of old English that we don't really use anymore. So it's kind of very official language.
Miss Shiner, please go downstairs. Miss Shiner, please go downstairs by the security desk.
So, we have this right here. We hold these truths, We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That phrase, all men are created equal. So that just means all people are equal. Right here, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That sentence means their rights are given to them by God. See how Creator is capitalized there? They're talking about some type of higher person, someone who's not a human being like the rest of us. So they must be talking about a God. That's why they capitalized that C. That was not an accident. They are endowed by their Creator, so their God, with certain unalienable rights, meaning some higher entity gives them their rights. Humans don't have the right, other people, whether they're the king or someone who's just a farmer, don't have the right to take those rights away. So it's given to them, and they were born with those rights. And let's take a look at what those rights are. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, you have the right to live. You have the right to be alive. Nobody can take that away from you. Liberty, the right to be free. Liberty, remember Lady Liberty? We had learned about that when we learned about the New York State Seal. I'm not sure. I think that was last social studies unit. So you have the right to be free and do whatever you want. So if you want to take a 2-mile walk today, then you can do that. If you want to not ever work, you can do that. You have the right to be free. The right to be free, not to be ruled by a king. And the last one is the pursuit of happiness. The right to do what makes you happy. So if you are very happy to be a farmer, you have the right to be a farmer. If you're happy to be a doctor, you can be a doctor. If you're happy to be a teacher, you can be a teacher. If you're happy to homeschool your kids instead of send them to school, you can do that. Anything that makes you happy goes, so long as it doesn't infringe, meaning so long as it doesn't interfere with anyone's right to do these things, their right to be free and live. All right? Now the last piece. is now we're going to watch another document. So the Declaration of Independence, that was a letter to the king. But we wrote a second document. This document is the document that tells us how our government runs, what we do as people, and how life will work for us now that we're not under a king, because that wasn't really done before. So I'm going to show you the brain pop to this.
Mr. Gribbers told me my mother was here with a note. That's not my mother. Dear Tim and Moby, what is the U.S. Constitution? Is it a law? From Jake. A constitution is a basic set of rules for government. It lays out how the government of a particular country works. So the U.S. Constitution does that for the United States. When our nation was founded, most countries were ruled by kings and queens. They had nearly absolute authority to make decisions for everyone and do whatever they wanted. But our founders wanted a system based on the rule of law. Everyone in the country, no matter who they are, has to follow the law. And the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That means all other laws have to stay within the limits it sets out. Any law that conflicts with it is illegal and declared unconstitutional. Well, the people who wrote the Constitution, called the Framers, divided it into several sections. First, there's the preamble, or introduction, which sets out the goals of the document. Then come the 7 main sections, called articles. Each article covers one part of government or a key government process, like how a new state can join the country, or the rules for appointing a judge. Finally, we have additions to the original document, called amendments. The framers knew the country would grow and evolve in ways they couldn't predict. So, the Constitution includes rules to amend or change the Constitution itself. But passing an amendment is way more difficult than passing a law. Since the Constitution's creation more than 200 years ago, it's only been amended 27 times. Our Constitution is based on a few core principles. One is self-government, also called popular sovereignty. The preamble starts with the words, "We the people," in huge letters. The idea is that the American people are creating a government through the Constitution. The power to rule belongs to us. But it wouldn't be practical if we had to weigh in on every decision the country needs to make. So we elect leaders to represent us in Washington. They make choices on our behalf by passing laws, appointing judges, running agencies, all that stuff. This kind of government is called a republic. We, the people, lend our power to representatives. If we don't like how they use it, we elect someone else the next time around. If our representatives try to abuse their power, that's against the law. They can only do what the Constitution allows them to. If a power isn't specifically written there, they don't have it. This principle of limited government prevents our leaders from grabbing too much power. It's like the flip side of...
So, I wanted to pause that and stop for a second. And they had spoken about a couple really interesting things. So the first one that I thought was, we the people. And you're going to see it at the bottom of the screen. We the people is a sentence that essentially says, the people, not a king, speak for themselves. They do this by voting. So we, the people, vote, and I'm sure some of your family members vote. I know I vote. You can vote when you turn 18. We vote for people to speak for us. We vote for the president and the governors and the mayor and all of those people. This is a republic because those people represent. Think of republic. It starts with rep. They represent us. So when we see someone who is running for president, we, the people as a whole nation, everybody in the nation, everyone in the U.S., votes for who they think will be the best. That's called popular sovereignty. That means the people have the power. We vote and we tell them what to do. They don't tell us what to do. Nobody is a king. And our leaders, our representatives, they speak for us for what they think is best for us.
Popular sovereignty.